Hello, everyone. Today is Tuesday, March 24th, 2020, and this is the weekly meeting for Kubernetes SIG Docs. This is a fourth Tuesday, so we are meeting at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And it's also a little weird because daylight savings happened, and it's there's the right way, the wrong way, and the US way, and we're doing it the US way. So for everyone who's going to show up in an hour, sorry about that. All right, let's get to our agenda. Our PR Wrangler, new contributors. Nope, just as friends. All right, this week's PR Wrangler is Chi Ming. Thank you, Chi Ming. Next week's PR Wrangler is Ryan McGinnis, except how it's not Ryan McGinnis on account of he parachuted out of the project a while back. So we need to find folks to replace Ryan in all of his PR slots. And while we are looking at the PR Wrangler schedule, let's see. The last time Zach Arnold was scheduled for a shift, he was a no-show. And I see Ryan, Zach, and I think it would be good to check with both Peter, aka Shangpeng Zhao, and Jennifer Rondeau, April 5th and April 12th, to see if they still want to do a PR rotation. The good news is that we have a couple more approvers since last time. So we can add Tim Bannister and Karen Bradshaw into the rotation. Yeah. I think I'm good for doing like another rotation as well. I would, yeah, maybe like the week of the 19th. Suddenly my conference schedule suddenly free, so I'm not so worried about trying to schedule around events now. Okay. Anything else that we need to cover about PR Wranglers? Okay, let's move on. Docs, release 1.18, so close, so close. Hopefully tomorrow. Jim, any news since we talked a few hours ago about the release candidate and any developments there?
No real updates other than we froze the repository or the master branch, and PR is merging to the master branch. So what normally is a 24-hour freeze on PRs merging into masters, now a 48-hour freeze.
Cool. Hey, David, I'm going to mute you. Yes. Thank you for the boost to the freeze. The repo is currently frozen for the release, so please no one approve any PRs until the release has been verified and we thaw. Okay, Doxy template and update. So I wrote to Gearbox, the contractors doing the work. I checked in with them to see how they're doing in a COVID-19 world, and they're doing okay. They say that they aim to be done by mid-April. So we're looking at an April 12th, April 15th completion date for the Doxy migration. I also gave them the feedback that we've gotten so far, that it looks great on desktop and that the mobile experience is kind of a train wreck. So they are aware of that and are taking it into consideration with their development. Diagrams. Jim and David, I know there was a little bit of discussion earlier, but I didn't catch what was going on there. David, do you want to talk about diagrams? David, diagram talk?
I think you'd have to unmute him yourself. You might not be able to talk even though.
David, are you there? Yeah.
Just on chat there, says give 1 sec, video issues.
Yeah, it's all good. Okay, we'll come back. Let's move on to any PRs needing review or attention, with the understanding that any action will be delayed. David, you good? Not yet. All right. Any PRs needing review or attention?
So quick comment here, Zach, since you were out last weekend, is that, or last meeting, is that we're going through the good first issues here. And it seemed like last week when I was doing that, it was more just me kind of clumsying around our good first issues and clicking through them. I don't know what benefits really were from that. But there was a lot of discussion around some of the PRs that, you know, some folks had questions about. I had questions about PRs as the PR Wrangler last week. And so I switched this up a little bit last week and just asked if there's anything I need to review or attention. But from my side, I got nothing.
Okay. That sounds like a very reasonable iteration on the process. There are a couple of things to discuss about docs and process, but I think we can maybe hold off on those for a minute.
Jack, I do have one PR needs some attention from the leadership team. The number is 19526.
19526.
Yeah.
Just pull that up.
It's about the different approaches to create intersect links. Currently,
okay.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
all
Go
these
ahead.
kind of links have to be revised by each localization team. That is not efficient. Is boring. Sometimes it causes some link errors. If we fix this in the English version, in some way, hopefully, all the localization teams can benefit from this. But
Okay.
I know it is gonna be a huge change to the whole site. So I added you and Jim and Kathleen to the reviewer list. Yeah.
Thank you for surfacing this. I remember seeing the conversation about it, but okay, so
yeah, it is a long
like
conversation. Yeah, so it needs some time to read through all of this to understand the background. And the latest progress is that Karen is also experimenting some different ways to get this thing to work. Yeah.
Okay. So with the repo being frozen for the release, I would say like give us this week to review it, and then let's come back and review next week. And I would say specifically, let us. Yeah,
it's not an urgent one.
Okay.
but it's
That's
gonna
good.
be yeah, a big one.
Okay.
Yeah, potentially.
If the scope of the change is that large, it sounds like that might be worth discussing at our quarterly planning meeting on April 1st. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah.
Okay. Then let's hold this off until quarterly meeting and discuss it there.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you for surfacing it for review. Let's see, other docs pieces. The KEP. So we had a KEP open for a long time about what specifically to do with third-party content and dual-sourced content. And after many reviews, the KEP is finally merged. So we have a policy in place in the documentation now about how we handle third-party content and what specifically to accept and to reject. That will help now and going forward for future PRs, but we also have some work to do to figure out what is there now and how to remove it. And many months ago, Amy Ukasik, if you remember her, opened an umbrella issue that sort of kicked this whole thing off. And that umbrella issue, the discussion there is so long and so crowded that umbrella issue doesn't really serve as a good umbrella issue anymore. So I am going to write up a new umbrella issue, credit Amy with having done the initial discovery work. And let's continue to use the umbrella issue TBD that I'll open to track third-party content that needs to be removed, and then start opening PRs to remove content. One thing to note is that part of the strategy for removing non-conforming content means that feature developers and stakeholders will have the whole of the 1.19 cycle to figure out what to do with their content and to rehome it if necessary. So this will be a powerful and effective change, but it may not be an immediate one. So just be prepared for some patience there. Also, as we start opening PRs to remove non-conforming content, there may be some response that says, "Whoa, why are you doing this? This should absolutely be here. No one asked me." We did ask. We asked everyone for a long time. So it's not a question of whether it's going, only when and how. So please don't spend a lot of bandwidth justifying the change. Refer them to the KEP itself that has all of the discussion and all of the steering committee and SIG architecture support there. So yeah, just I would encourage us all to be maximally helpful and minimally distracted when removing third-party content. Okay, it's the KEP. David, do you want to talk about diagrams?
Yeah, I'm back. Can you guys hear me okay? Yes?
Yes, sorry, go for it.
I saw some head shaking and I was like, I think that means yes. Okay, so yes, a lot of thoughts has gone into what's been happening. So, you know, we've got this original scope of work that I started what seems like a very long time ago. And a lot of people gave feedback on that scope of work. So what I started doing was combing through that feedback, and I put together, I opened up an issue 19811, I'll paste that here, assigned it to myself, and I started going through Istio and what that team did to address the architectural diagrams. And I've kind of been studying their site, the pages. and they actually have used a tool in Google that lets you edit kind of like Adobe Illustrator. So I copied that SVG file that Istio provided as a download through Google Docs. I just put a copy there in the chat, and I've been kind of messing around with it. And one of the ideas that came from the feedback from the original scope of work was we can't just turn over this project to a design team and expect them to know what is needed, because it's very specific to Kubernetes. So what I started to do is I started to take some of the Kubernetes architecture that's in the documentation. There's 2 key architectures, and I dropped them into, you guys can click on that link if you want to see what I'm looking at. And I dropped them into an SVG in Google, like Istio did. And I was kind of playing with, how can I get this close enough to make sense that if we did bring in someone with some design skills, they could not be starting from scratch. So that was from the advice from Celeste in Berlin. She had made that recommendation. So I took a list of the icons in these 2 diagrams and basically said, here's like the 9 things that we're going to need in terms of an icon to be able to redo these 2 basic architectures and make them clean and neat. It's been a very humbling experience with my mediocre design skills, but I'm hoping to finish this week and at least have a draft, and then maybe see if we can get other people's feedback, and then maybe if we get it close enough, we could bring in an actual graphic design artist to just focus on fixing the icons and the graphical pieces, and then have something like Istio. So that's part 1. Part 2 is if we actually launch this onto the documentation site, it would be where to put this. And if you look at Istio, they have their diagram creation guidelines where we would have the start contributing page where it says style guidelines. Istio has the style guidelines too, and they put their diagram creation guidelines below the style guidelines. So we have to potentially look at where to include the diagram creation guidelines. And then we have to have a page called Diagram Creation Guide that would have a little paragraph, as well as the SVG artwork like Istio has, that people could download and edit with Google Draw, Inkscape, or Illustrator. So I'll pause there because it's a lot to take in.
Thank you. One tiny request, a nit before we move on. Instead of saying you guys, please say you folks, or your other gender neutral collective pronoun of choice. So Celeste, you're the closest one. I think you've got the most exposure and probably the best understanding. Any feedback on this right now?
I think this is roughly the right direction to go in terms of narrowing the scope. So I think it was a good exercise to go through. This is my first time looking at it, and I'm extremely jet lagged, and that's the best I can do right now.
She gave really good feedback, by the way, on that document. It was very good feedback, and so cool. Yeah.
Dave, are you in the SIG Docs Slack channel?
Yes, and I
Okay.
put this issue in SIG Docs.
Yeah. Okay. Good. When my brain returns, I'll reach out to you there.
Yeah.
But The reason I'm never at the Asia meetings when I'm in Berlin is that it's at 3 a.m. So, and I flew in
Oh,
on
no.
Sunday, so it's
Okay.
still 3 a.m.
No worries. Yeah.
Cool. As far as where diagram creation guidelines live, I think that's absolutely the right choice. Putting it in the like close to the style guide, putting it in the
Start
contribute docs.
contributing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
what it
the
is.
best place to put it. So solid on that as well.
Okay. We're far from a PR. I think we just need a lot of pre-work, a lot of discussions, and the artwork that I did is pretty raw, but I think I'd like to get it where it would at least make sense to someone who has the skill to do it the right way. So
your artwork far exceeds anything I could produce. So cheers. And yeah, thank you for your dedication on this and your persistence in getting this to be a viable thing.
Cool. Well, that's it. We'll give Celeste a chance to get over jet lag and take your time, look it over, and hit me on Slack, and we'll keep whittling away at this. I'll be happy with that progress. So that's it.
Cool. Thank you, David, and thank you, Celeste, in advance. Okay, let's move on. Diagrams. Let's see. My brain isn't working either. Caitlin, any news or anything to discuss from the blog?
We got a few additional blog posts out last week, which I cannot think of what they are off the top of my head. We have a couple in the pipeline right now after the 1.18 release comes out next week, and then followed by we have, I want to say, 2 or 3 blog posts in the 5 Days of Kubernetes series.
Cool. Anything that you need or want from the community at large?
No, I think we're still doing great, but just my typical shout out that if anybody's interested in also getting involved in some blog work, we're always looking for new contributors there.
Awesome. I remembered the other thing that it's important for us to discuss as a community. So the 1.18 release process was difficult for a number of reasons. One of the reasons was that our default merge strategy is not friendly to the way that things need to merge to keep the development branch happy. So Jim opened a discussion issue to change the website's default merge strategy to squash, which if you've been around for long enough, you remember was the way that we used to do things like 2 years ago. And thank you, Jim, for the link. That's the PR to actually change that strategy is in the test info repo. And it's 16.892 is the pull request. The reason why we initially changed it, let's see, it used to be merged, then we changed it to squash. And the reason why we did that was we were seeing pull requests with multiple commits that weren't just additions of content, but were sometimes like revert commits, things that were rewriting history. And when those commits would merge into master, it would create conflicts, create problems. And it was, at the time, it was a way of making sure that squashed commits were always entering the repository by default. That's become an issue in the development branch for reasons that Junyi has laid out in an excellent diagram that I wish I had open in some tab somewhere, or that Junyi was himself here to explain. But we can find that if you're really interested in why. Junyi did a really good job explaining the technical details, but the takeaway is that it's important for our default strategy to go back to merge. It's going to be the friendliest set of defaults for working with a long-running development branch going forward. it's on us as approvers, however, to make sure that PRs against master are squashed. So approvers, when you are reviewing a PR against master, make sure that the commits are squashed. Unless we make sure those commits are squashed, we will start seeing the behavior that we saw 2 years ago. And merge conflicts created where they didn't need to be because we're no longer squashing by default. So yes, again, approvers, make sure that PRs have been squashed before you approve them and allow them to merge. That seems like everything to talk about there, Jim. Jim, Caitlin, did we cover all that?
I had something that came to mind, and it came and went as as soon as I thought of it. One thing we did, oh, I know what it is. I recently updated, I have a link here more explaining more about the issues with the release process and why we're making this change. It's a little bit more getting deeper into the whys of why we're doing this. But I added a checklist item. I believe it'd be beneficial for the entire SIG Docs community if we had a clear documented process of how to squash your commits in the contributing guidelines. So I added that as a checkbox as at least some sort of pointers how to get there before we make this change actually merge. I think that'd be a decent prerequisite, bare essential to have, as well as maybe potential workarounds if folks are not technically able to squash them. There might be some workarounds there, as we discussed earlier.
Yeah, that seems like a completely reasonable thing. If we're going to ask people to squash their commits, then at least providing nominal guidance on how to do that seems totally appropriate. There is a tied workaround, but it requires write permissions to use it, and we're trying, as like the Kubernetes project as a whole is trying to minimize the number of write permissions out there, and I think as a side effect of well, as a necessary side effect of the way that we do things, I think we've got the most people with write permissions, and anything that we can do to cut that number down is good. But yeah, it's +1 to documentation about how to squash commits. That would probably be a good first issue.
It would be, but I'm very heavily in that particular area right now, so I think it might also be a good SLUST issue, because then I can add it to the current files and simultaneously add it to my PR and hopefully avoid any insanity.
That seems totally reasonable.
Okay.
So if you are interested in helping to review the content that Celeste is creating, this would be a good first issue for review.
Okay. I'll open a PR on that probably tomorrow.
All right, that is what we have on the agenda, I think.
I got one thing to add.
Yeah, go for it.
Yep. So Steve Perry had put together this scope of work draft about putting together a video. He mentioned this, I think, like maybe 6 or 7 months ago. I thought the video was an excellent idea. I put a link to it in the chat. And it might be good to add this to the cadence of keeping track of where it's at. I think it'd be a great tool to, as someone who, like myself, who's newer to PRs and this whole process, I really value this kind of training. I know Gwen has this huge YouTube channel and from Seattle, this great big long how-to on PRs. But something with what like Steve's talking about, I think it'd be very helpful, Steve Perry. So just want to keep my eyes open for progress on that. I think it's an exciting project.
Thank you for reminding me. I saw that Steve had raised that for discussion, and then it completely slipped my mind. So yes, let's talk about that at the quarterly review as well. How specifically to move forward and implement that. Because yeah, at our last quarterly review, Steve took that on, and kudos to Steve for producing that deliverable. So yeah, let's talk about that at quarterly review, I think we could make a couple of short videos that would be well received about like how to squash commits, for example, things like that. And Celeste, you just got the steel in your eyes, like, am I embedding videos in my content now? Look.
I mean,
So,
it's the typical like documentation person thing of like videos can be hard to maintain.
yeah, that's real. Some content goes stale quickly.
Yeah.
But that said, let's look at ways that we can explore that without immediately plunging into technical debt. So, okay. Let's see, Korean team. Oh, thank Junyi Plus for providing a Korean team update. So no membership updates, totally unsurprising given the world we live in at the moment. Let's see, 2 team milestone branches, 1.17.5 and 1.17.6 have been merged into master. 1.17.7 they're planning on merging that into release -1.17 on March 26th. And they're looking to move to 1.18 on that date. So they're keeping a really tight cadence with the Kubernetes release process itself. They're marching very closely behind the Kubernetes quarterly release. So kudos to the Korean team for keeping up a really incredible pace of localization. So thank you, Junyi. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you to everyone, Sioko-san, and to everyone on the Korean team. You're doing great work. All right, anything else to discuss? Oh, I guess we should discuss the actual quarterly meeting. So, quarterly meeting. Jim is proposing that we do this on April 1st, which is what is that? Is that a Wednesday? A Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Let's see, what am I doing? Wednesday is rough for me. Could we do, it's rough in like a not easily movable way. Is there any chance we could do Thursday the 2nd at 10 a.m.?
So the April 2nd was the original date, and I have an all-day conflict during that April 2nd timeframe. So the other option was April 3rd, if it's any better. I know a lot of folks thought maybe Friday wasn't ideal, but that's kind of maybe where we end up at.
Gotcha. How about 11 a.m. on April 1st?
Yeah.
Like, I know Tim will hate our guts, but.
So April 1st, 11 a.m. as opposed to 10 a.m.?
Yes.
I mean, I'm indifferent, but I know that I'm the one who's requesting the change. So I mean, the folks who are impacted by this may be.
Sure. Okay. Let's float it. I'll open the discussion. Propose Wednesday the 1st at 11 a.m. If that doesn't work, then like a second choice of Friday at 10 a.m. I know it's not ideal for folks. Tim will really hate us if we do that. So let's try not to pick on Tim with Friday night scheduling. But okay, let's see, what else needs to be done there? Jim and Caitlin, the 3 of us need to put together an agenda doc for the quarterly review, and we need to get that out for folks to add changes by like Friday at the latest of this week. It's not much time to give folks for review, but historically I've found that it didn't make a lot of difference to have it open for a longer time versus a shorter one. But yeah, so we need to take an action item to produce the agenda The good news is that like the format already exists. We basically just have to recycle our notes from the last time or the last quarterly review and get them ready for our meeting on April 1st, as opposed to April 3rd. What else do we need to do? Yeah, I think that's well, let's get the agenda rolled out, and we can start asking folks on email and Slack what they would like to see, what they'd like to prioritize in Q2. Okay. Anything else to say about quarterly review?
Maybe tangentially related to this is the calendar stuff that we've recently discussed about juggling.
Yeah. I don't know that I want to take a lot of time to talk about that, just because it would be dumping information without any resolution or actionable stuff. So there is a calendar. Hopefully meetings will be easier as a result of having that calendar. Stay tuned for details. Okay. Thank you, Jim, for creating that calendar, by the way. All right, anything else to talk about? Folks doing okay?
Yes, I'm missing all the dancing to sign off though, Zach. I kind of look forward to that in my week.
No promises.
No promises this week.
It's quarterly review. We have a dance break,
Okay.
and as a reminder, everyone can dance. Just because I'm enthusiastic about it doesn't mean that I'm the only one doing it.
Awesome.
Oh, Qiming, yes, UTC time in the agenda docs. That's the goal of having the calendar. So TBD as to when exactly that will take effect, but we're working on it. All right, and if there's nothing else to discuss, that's a SIG meeting. Have a good week, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
See ya.
Bye.